How's it, everyone? Welcome to another edition of my racket collection right here on OpenCourt. So in today's racket collection, I am introducing a classic that's very popular, and it is a racket that I only frequently use, but it is something that is undeniably very popular among the advanced level players, and that is the Wilson K Factor SixOne 95. Let's check it out. So before I get into this racket, I just want to say I have this strung up with a diadem string, and I've never used a diadem string before, so I'm going to hit with this string and review it. That review will be up shortly after I talk about this racket, so look forward to that. So I'm sure many of you have heard of this line. The SixOne 95 line is very popular among advanced level players. It is known as a classic player's stick with that 95 square inch head, control oriented feel. This is the K Factor version. I think the one before this was the N code version, but this is supposedly the stiffest out of the bunch, out of the SixOne lineup. So this is a pretty old racket, but it is part of the Pro Staff lineup, which of course Roger Federer popularized, and it is a very popular racket, and it's known for having these two thick bumps here at the 3 and 9 position. This gives the racket a natural stability, which this kind of needs because it's a 95 square inch. The smaller the head size, the more unstable it's going to be because the sweet spot is going to be smaller. This technology has been copied and implemented in other subsequent Wilson lineups, such as the newer Pro Staffs, the Wilson Burn, and the Wilson Ultra series, to name a few. It also has a very long throat piece, as you can see here, so the flex point is going to be pretty low, which actually gives it a little bit of pop. So it's not a completely underpowered racket, but it definitely does lean a little bit more towards control. So here are the specs to this K Factor SixOne 95. So I'm using the 16-18 version, so it is a pretty open pattern, but it is a 95, so it skews towards control. But that 16-18 open pattern gives me a little bit more spin, a little bit more pop. There is also an 18-20 version, so combined with the 95 square inch, if you're using the 18-20, it's going to be very controlled. It's a very difficult racket to use. I want a little bit more help with power and spin, which is why I opted to get this 16-18 version. It's a 22mm straight beam, very aerodynamic, very head light, weight and balance, and honestly it's ideal for slicing and dicing and volleying, which is what I typically like to do. So this is a very popular racket. I don't bust it out too often because it is a 95. I like something with a little bit more real estate in the head to help my serves, the power on the serves, but this is a very popular racket, and so let's take it out on the court and let's get into the pros and cons of this classic Wilson K Factor SixOne 95. So starting out with the pros of the Wilson K Factor SixOne 95. For a 95 square inch head, this racket provided a decent amount of spin and power because of the 16-by-18 pattern. Usually 16-by-18 is way too open for me. The launch angle is going to be way too high, but in a 95, I believe this is perfect for me. The 18-20 would be much too difficult for me to use. The 16-18 provides a good balance of spin and power. Especially, I noticed the spin on the slices. Because this racket is on the head lighter side, I was able to slice and dice around the court, be able to knife through that slice. I consistently was able to make contact in front of my body on the slices, even on the defensive ones or even at the net on the volleys. The control is also very good. Obviously, it's going to be good in a 95 square inch head, but even with my lower tension that I strung it in and the 16-18 pattern, I could take big swings from the baseline, especially on my two-handed backhand. I could get the ball deep within a foot of the baseline consistently, so the control is really good. I definitely like the backhand better than the forehand from the baseline with this racket. More on that a little bit later. My favorite shots with this racket were the volleys and the slices because it's headlight. I actually weighted down the butt cap a little bit. I opened it up and put some tungsten putty, but I also put a little bit of lead tape at the 3 and 9 position because I didn't want to make it too fluttery in the hand, give it a little bit more torsional control. and so the stability in stock form I think is decent, not great, but after my customization it was definitely more suited for my game. And because I weighted it down, I was able to get the reflex volleys and defensive slices back relatively easily. And especially on the touch volleys, I was able to hit the ball into the corners, get it to drop right by the net and be able to follow it up and put the ball away. I like to kind of hit unorthodox slices and drop volleys and angle volleys to kind of put my opponent out of position, and I usually like to hit the ensuing shot into the open court, and I was able to use that unorthodox net play to be able to keep control of the point. The kick serve was also pretty good, especially because I customized it a bit. I weighted it down in the handle. I was able to pronate and accelerate through the point of contact with the kick serve very well, and I noticed that I was able to consistently get that kick serve bouncing into the corner or bouncing on the sideline, and I was able to pull my opponent off the court and follow it in for an approach volley. And like I said earlier, this racket has great touch, and I think that's due to the firmness, the stiffness rating of this racket. The K Factor was known for being a little bit stiff, and I missed the firmness of the rackets of this era. I didn't have any problem with the stiffness. My arm was perfectly fine even with a full bit of poly, and the firmer it is, usually the better feel I have, and I definitely liked it better at the net because of that, because I was able to hit my angle volleys and drop shots, and I was getting the feedback and response that I'm looking for. So the SixOne 95, I was surprised at the spin and power level, but also I got great control on the slices, the angle volleys, and I really liked it on my backhand ground stroke especially. But now moving into the cons, I like the backhand ground stroke a lot better than the forehand, and that's because my forehand I tend to swing a little bit faster, and so I need to be more precise with my swing. The SixOne 95 has a very small sweet spot, and I felt myself catching off center a lot, especially on my aggressive returns. I was consistently hitting the frame or hitting off center on my forehand return with the SixOne 95. It also in stock form, I felt it lacked a little bit of stability, which is why I put a little bit of lead tape at the 3 and 9 position to increase that stability. That could affect the balance, which is why I also put weight under the butt cap. But in stock form, in a 95 square inch racket, I think this racket is going to be a little bit unstable, especially if you're used to playing against heavy hitters. Although the kick serve worked well for me because I was able to accelerate and kick up on the ball, my flat and slice serves were not working for me as well, mostly because the sweet spot is small and the racket itself is not really meant for power anyway. So my slice serves especially, I wasn't able to clear the net consistently, and even when I couldn't consistently hit the ball near the sideline and pull my opponent off the court. I definitely struggled more serving from the deuce court than the ad court with the SixOne 95. And lastly, I mistimed a lot of overheads because of the small sweet spot and because of the small head size. I'm not really good at hitting overheads to begin with, but I definitely missed my fair share with this racket, and so I wasn't too confident when my opponent would lob the ball up. I would often let it bounce. But if you're taller than me, this is not going to be a problem. And to be honest, the overhead is not really my favorite shot anyway. This is just something I noticed as I was playing with the SixOne 95. So who is the Wilson K Factor SixOne 95 for? Well, first of all, they don't make this racket anymore, so it really doesn't matter. But if you're looking to maybe buy this racket used on the secondary market, it's definitely for players with clean mechanics and a fluid motion who can produce their own power and strike the sweet spot cleanly and consistently. This 95, especially if you opt for the 1821, is going to be very unforgiving in terms of the power level. The 1618, especially because I strung it at 48 pounds, is actually pretty decent powered, but you need to hit the sweet spot cleanly. You need to be able to watch the ball, and I definitely recommend it for advanced players who are looking for more control. But because the sweet spot is small, you need to have fluid motions and sound mechanics to be able to strike that ball cleanly. I really like this racket on the serve and volley. I didn't like it too much from the baseline because I relied so much on my aggressive forehand. I was shanking a lot, but if you're more disciplined with your stroke, I definitely think the SixOne 95 will provide you with that surgical control that a lot of advanced players are looking for. Unfortunately for me, the SixOne is not something that I can consistently use because my game is so predicated around aggressive returns. This racket is great on the volleys, but being able to set myself up to get up to the net is where I struggled the most with this racket. But if you have clean mechanics, this is a fan favorite racket. The SixOne is a classic, and so I definitely encourage you to try it, especially since it's been a few years now. You could probably find it at a reasonable price on the secondary market. Thank you for watching this review of the Wilson Pro Staff K Factor SixOne 95 right here on OpenCourt. If you guys like this content, be sure to overhead smash that like and subscribe button, and I'll see you on an OpenCourt.